Hello? Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? I came with a sweater on. I don't understand Curitiba weather. Yesterday it was cold. And so I thought, well, today will probably be, similarly cold. And so I decided to wear a nice new sweater that my wife gave me, and it was on sale yesterday. Now I know why it was on sale. So maybe it better, next time I'll bring a short sleeve shirt as a spare. All right, today is our last day talking about the introduction. And as you can see, the introduction is due on Wednesday next week. Actually due Wednesday morning next week. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a little while. Starting next week, we're talking about the results section and other sections after that. So we're heading towards the end. As I mentioned before, the two sections that we focus on especially in this class are the introduction and the discussion sections for two reasons. One, both those sections are usually found in all areas of knowledge, all disciplines, not just a few. Also, because those two sections are the ones that really require the most work, that pose difficulty for a lot of people, whether they be native speakers of English or not. Okay. So today, we're going to look at some of the homework that you did, but this time looking at the homework in the context of what are called the 3 C's. You'll see a little bit more about that in a minute. We're going to talk about a concept called authorial voice and why that's important. We're going to talk about words and phrases called connectives. You've probably heard some of you have heard about these before and how they relate to the other things that we talk about. Very briefly, we'll talk about some tips to organize your methods section. And then finally, some important information about your introduction section, which is actually a midterm evaluation, a formal midterm evaluation in this class. Okay, last week, that was part of our class, this idea of a character that is introduced, and last week I brought a guitar, a character that is introduced in something that seems out of place or you don't understand why it's there. In this case, Big Bird in Star Wars. And you saw some examples of this. This one, for example, in which they're talking about bioinformatics, and then in this red sentence here, they seem to highlight graphical representations. And so the reader expects, okay, graphical representations is something that's important in this work. But in fact, it isn't. And the reader keeps expecting it to be because it's mentioned. Kind of like the guitar, when I brought it on stage, you expected me to play it. Just like if you see Big Bird in that photograph, you expect him to, for some reason, for him to be explained why he's there. In this case, graphical representations doesn't seem to be an important part of this, and so it distracts. It's kind of an extraneous bit of information. If it is an important bit of information, it's not made clear why it is to the reader. Connections aren't made. And today, throughout the class today, you'll see how it's important that for you to make those connections for the reader. We did a very simple example of the 3 pigs, and you saw that there was some information here that was both extraneous and also dislocated. So, this, for example, you read it, you think, why mention ages? It's not important. Why mention the person's name? It's not important. Why is it relevant to talk about the cost of the material? In this story, at least as you know, it's not really that relevant, and so why put it there? Of course, it's a very simple, childish example, but the reason that this kind of information is included often is because of that situation we talked about before, where you're working on your dissertations, you're working on your thesis, you have all this information in your head, you got all this stuff that you're reading about, and you actually have to to cut it down. And sometimes you accidentally let some information go into parts that don't belong, that distract the reader, like these here. But also, in addition to extraneous information, you have some information that seems dislocated or that could be better organized in a more logical way. So here you have, there was a wolf nearby, and then again another mention of the wolf later. And this doesn't seem to be the best order, the best sequence of things. Again, this is a reflection of a common situation that is found in academic works, especially for those who have less experience in publishing. Okay. This here, you see this red arrow is pointing to bricks, and it's also pointing to the house. And if you read this without the arrow, it took longer to blow down the second house, but the wolf did it. The third house was made of bricks. It's not clear the relationship between the brick house and the time it took. There should be a better order for those things. And so we saw the example of Alessandra Schneider. I'm using her name because I showed it to you before. And she changed it in ways that were interesting. For example, this part of different ages, you can see that she took that out. Okay, good. She also added some contextualization, once upon a time, okay? And she also added some good words. Here, can you see? Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs, blah, 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 needed to build a home, blah, blah, blah. There was a wolf nearby. Can you guess what those words are? Two simple little words and can make a big difference in connecting and making the relationship for the reader simple. Very simple. And you think, okay, duh, I know that. Yes, but when many people write, they often make this kind of disassociated, or they don't make connected sentences and ideas like Alessandra did here, connecting the dots. There were 3 little pigs that needed to build a home because there was a wolf nearby. This makes more sense. The original version here, she took out Porky, and she also took out the relationship of the material cost. Instead, she added some more relevant information. This information about bricks are a stronger material, explaining that for the reader. Even though it should be obvious, making that clear. And then, instead of having 2 separate ideas, the third house was made of bricks, it was impossible, broke down, she adds a little word to connect that, a little connector. As the third house was made of bricks, it was impossible, broke down. Because of X, then Y. They're nice and clearly connected. So as you can see, just little words made a big difference. You could have also had because the third house. She also noticed that there was a problem with this, or rather, she didn't deal with this wolf nearby. So I'm going to come back to this, how this information could also be improved. This part in red. Why have these separate? So I'm going to show you another example from Alessandra. You might think, okay, the key to doing well in this class is being named Alessandra, because I've shown you 2 Alessandras and they've both done fantastically well. No, it's because I'm so lazy, I don't get past the A's in the students. I just go, A, oh, B, forget it, too much. It's late. Well, that's not true. Partly true. Alessandra Gosh, she also tried changing it, and she also made some interesting changes. She also took out the ages thing. She also added a that. And she added a little word in there. Can you guess what that word is? Or a phrase that can go in that second slot? Very simple. Little connector to say, because this, in order to do this. Connected all those dots, something that was 3 sentences before, made it much more cohesive. Similarly to the other Alessandra, she added an as, but she added some extra information as well, because she thought there was insufficient information to make it clear to the reader. Not extraneous, but insufficient in this case. And so she wrote, as the first house was made of straw, because of this, then he easily blew it down. Good. And she added 2 simple words here as well. Can you guess what those are? Two simple connecting words. Obviously, I've taken a very, very, very simple story, but you can see how within this story, little mistakes, to rectify them requires a little bit of complexity, but that complexity often involves little words, small words, and carefully organizing information. And this is what is called the 3 C's. Sometimes people say 6 C's. They'll add all kinds of C's. I'm narrowing it down to 3 C's, which is simply coherence, cohesion, and clarity. Trying to make it very simple for you. What are these things? We're going to talk about all these things today. This is a big theme throughout the class today, and it's the last thing that we're going to talk about with respect to your introduction, although it will come back again when we talk about discussion and conclusion. Simply put, coherence is, does one idea logically connect to the previous and subsequent ones? Cohesion, textual cohesion, refers to the words that we use to connect. Phrases as well. And then clarity, for the purposes of this class, refers to, is there enough information to make your meaning clear? Not extraneous information and not insufficient information. Is there enough information there? Or is there something missing, or is there something extra that's distracting? Clarity can also involve more things, but we're going to focus on this for now. Okay, so you remember this, I live in Curitiba, I have many umbrellas. This happens a lot of times because of this trying to squeeze so much information into an article, usually copying and pasting from your literature review, from your thesis, your dissertation, and then you have these ideas that don't seem to connect. Here, you see, we saw this happen in an introduction about Peroba Rosa. I asked you to look at this, either a Portuguese version or an English version. In the Portuguese version, many of you identified some of the problems. So, here, first of all, you see that there is redundant information. The person gets to the second extinção and thinks, has a déjà vu experience. Like, wait a minute, didn't this person already mention this before? So it's extraneous, it distracts. Also, there's another problem here that's related to coherence or cohesion, which is that it's not clear what this ocorrem refers to. Is it the formações or is it the espécies? It's difficult in this case. And here, this bit here also seems to be another bit of information related to extinction, so it seems dislocated. Okay, so here are some ways that people fix them. They're interesting. From Alexandre, again, another person with an A name, he adds this que here to make it so that it's clear, at least in this case, what occurs where, what is occurring. Simple little word. That makes it more coherent. Also, he adds this em função do seu alto valor comercial, a espécie corre perigo de extinção. He didn't have extinção at the top, he put that there. So he reorganized the information. Here's the original text. And you notice that it's difficult to see the connection between what the arrow separates. Poucos estudos são realizados, and then, de forma geral, a semente dessa espécie apresenta. It's hard to see what the relationship is between this. Of course, in the author's head, they see the relationship. It's very clear to the author's head what the relationship is. But to the reader, even a reader inside this area may not immediately make this connection. How do these two things relate? What is the coherence between these two things? So, Alexandre, he added some information to try to make it clearer to the reader. Now, if you're from this area, you could argue, well, I don't know if that's the best way to say it or not, but the point is, you could identify that something had to be clarified for the reader. Something had to be made more transparent of what the relationship was between one idea and the one that preceded it. Oh, sorry, the first attendance word for today is... It's not very clear. Oh, clarity. Clarity is the first attendance word. Okay, Alexandre puts this information here, and you'll notice that with this extra bit of information, some extra cohesion might be more obvious, because extinção, this preservação da espécie, is clearly linked to the idea of extinção. So even though it's in a separate paragraph, it refers back to this extinção. Not some dislocated information, but he makes it clear how those ideas connect. And adds this outro problema to say, and this links to a different problem, which is blah, blah, blah. So the first one, this preservação da espécie, you could say is what's called an anaphoric reference. It refers to something before it. And this outro problema is a cataphoric reference. Something refers after it. But the point is that they're referencing other parts of the text. He is referencing other parts of the text through this green, what I've highlighted in green here, makes it clear the relationship between one thing and the other. He didn't change anything here, Alexandre, but he did add something here. He thought, okay, I need to make this clearer for the reader. and he connected all together. There's not enough research in this area, so this is what justifies our research. That was good. Another person, Isabella Kahari, is she here? Good job. Sorry. Isabella has turned bright red suddenly. I only put good things here. I never show bad examples. This is because you're top. This is very good. I like this gerund clause that she puts here because it just adds information to the previous idea. Peroba rosa, uma espécie florestal, sendo encontrada, instead of completely separate sentences, e ocorre nas regiões sul, sudeste, adding information. Little words making a big difference to make it flow much better. This is the original text from the article. And here you can see how it flows better. I'll let you just look at that for a second. Okay, so that is much more cohesive, adds some flow, some coherence. Remember, there was a problem with two mentions of extinção. So what does Isabella do? She sees that sementes need to, the relationship between one thing and the other thing, there's two mentions of sementes, they need to make a connection there. So what does she do? She makes this better. She connects these ideas between poucos estudos and sementes no sendo germinadas. And she notices something that goes back to the idea of they say, I say. Correct me if I'm wrong, Isabella. Is that she notices that this first part really belongs more in the I say section. It's more of an I say this. She thinks, I gotta change the order here. Because they're putting an I say and then a they say. This first part, talking about poucos estudos, is really kind of coming back to the justification for the work. It's more of an I say. So what does Isabella do? She flips the order. And you can see how that looks better. Especially when you consider that she adds an important word here to connect all of this to the subsequent text. Can you guess what that word is? Very simply, and she does this because look at the original version of this. It almost looks like, especially because there are two separate paragraphs, it almost looks like the author is starting a new idea with this alguns trabalhos, but actually they're related. And so Isabella identifies this, and she says, I need to connect this connection. It's not a new topic. There's no word there to connect it to the previous. So what does she do? She adds something here to connect that idea. Simply that. In the original version, it wasn't exactly clear why the author was talking about there's a lot of estudos in the original version, a lot of estudos, and then after that talking about the baixa germinação. Instead, she says, you know what? I think that we need to talk about the baixa determinação, and then we're going to have a section where we're going to talk about previous studies. We should put that one next to that information, right? And that looks much better. That flows much better. So she's made basically the they say and the I say more logical because she's connecting the ideas of the sementes through that second part there with that porém. It's very nice. And then that's the end of her section there, and it all flows very nicely. Good job. I also asked you, some of you did the English one. This one was a bit more challenging because obviously it was in English, so maybe it's harder for a lot of people to do it in English. But also it was a bit messier than the other one. And so this is about carrion associated beetles. And one of the problems that we identified was that it seemed to have a series of topics that didn't relate to each other. There was little or not a really clear coherence between the ideas. First, you talk about studies of ecological aspects of necrophagous fauna. Then, North America and European countries have better knowledge about their fauna than Brazil. And then, separately, Brazil has one of the highest homicide rates in the world. This was hard to connect these very separate ideas, or apparently, if you're reading this, this is a real submission that we received at CAPAS like a year ago. Now, remember reading this for the first time and not understanding what the author was trying to say. So, some people tried to change it, and Alan, I'm going to highlight Alan dos Anjos. Is he here, Alan dos Anjos? No? Look what he does. Look what he did there. He said, okay, what is the key concept here that the author wants to bring about? What is the concept that I can build other structures of meaning on? So he says, this author in the original version, they're hanging, it's like they're building separate structures. They're building one structure related to ecological aspects, then some information. Then they're building another structure built on, under which some information happens about Brazil versus North America and Europe, and then another structure about homicide, and they're not connected. Instead, he says, you know what? I'm going to build the structure of, I'm going to build a macro structure of the Brazilian homicide rate, and all of the other structures will be built under that. So everything hangs from that. And that makes it more logical. So you have to be very careful about all of the information that you have in your head and trying to squeeze it into an article. All the information that you have in your thesis or your dissertation and trying to squeeze it into an article. Let's go back to this again. This, I live in Curitiba, I have many umbrellas. What's the problem here? How would you fix it? If you were to make one sentence, just one sentence, how would you make this so that it's clearer for a reader? Just one sentence. I want you to go ahead and try that. Write it, and through that link at the top of the screen, write a sentence that makes this better, that connects these ideas, makes it more coherent, more cohesive, clearer. And then I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and we'll look at some good examples. You know, when we have like fives. There are? Okay. Do they have likes already? Do they have likes? There are already a few there. If you access that link, you can also like the best ones. Just give it another minute. Okay, so far the top answer is this one here. I live in Curitiba, a rainy city, so I have many umbrellas. Also, you have Lucas with I live in Curitiba. Oops. Oh, actually Marianne is winning now. I have many umbrellas because I live in Curitiba. I live in Curitiba, a rainy city, so I have many umbrellas. It was Danielle Luis. They're all good. I like this one. I like both of these, but since Danielle Ruiz has this information about rainy city, I think it's especially good. Because for me, that was key information. If you're coming from to this sentence without any information about Curitiba, it's not clear why you need many umbrellas. So Danielle Ruiz says, I live in Curitiba, a rainy city, so I have many umbrellas. This sentence is much better than the original one, which it lacked coherence, it lacked cohesion, and it lacked clarity. This, this here has coherence, cohesion, and clarity. Because why? It's clear why. It's clear why you need umbrellas, because it's a rainy city. Rainy city and umbrellas, they link. So that information is there, and they connect clearly. You also have coherence because that word "so" is in there. So cohesion. So the "so" is a good cohesive device. It makes this cohere. It makes the cohesiveness much clearer. And then it's clear because you don't have any extra or extraneous information, but you have enough information. So this is good. This is a far superior than the original version. Okay. I'd like to move on. We're going to come back to this idea in a little while, but we're going to come back to it after we talked about something called authorial voice. What's authorial voice? Authorial voice is about not letting your work or your ideas get lost in a crowd. It's about making your voice be heard through your work. That's you, that's your work. And all of the people around you and on the beach, those are perhaps all of the other authors that you have read. And sometimes that person, that little circle there, gets so lost because a person hasn't made their voice heard. You have to let your voice be heard through your writing so that the reader understands, okay, what is this person's idea? Why is this person writing this? So, in the following text, I'm going to show you, the text I'm going to show you is actually it's a published introduction. Just look at it and you tell me, is it clear what the I say is? I know it's very small, but you'll notice something interesting here. Do you notice something about this introduction? If you look at it, if you look at every line, every new paragraph begins with an author. Not the authors of this paper, but another author. Every line begins with what somebody else said. You might say, well, that's part of they say, right? Well, no. This is not they say, I say. This kind of structure, which is very common, is more he said, she said. And this is what some people call a laundry list of sources. And what's happening here? In this he said, she said, in this structure here, the author's voice is lost. It's not clear to see where the author is positioning her or himself with respect to the other authors. They're just citing other authors. Why do people do that? It's an interesting question. Part of it is probably related to this, is that authors with less experience, they often don't think of themselves as entering a conversation. To enter a conversation, you have to believe that your voice will be heard, that people are interested to hear what you have to say. I mean, think of the conversations that you have with people every day. If there's a group of friends, you believe that you can go in there and say, hey, what are you guys talking about? And they will converse with you. You don't stand there and listen and tell other people what they're saying. You go there and say, I'm going to talk to these people. I'm going to have a conversation. You're entering that conversation. With scientific writing, it's the same thing. There's a conversation going on among all of these researchers around the world, responding to different problems in different ways, often authors responding to each other. You've probably seen that often in your literature review, responses, direct responses to particular authors, to particular studies. So they're entering a conversation. And that is something it's a concept that I can't teach you in this class. I can't teach you to how to enter that conversation. It's something that actually comes out more of a product of your own sense of identity as a contributor to science. If you are an undergraduate student, it's unlikely that you feel this identity. You feel like you're a consumer. You read stuff and you try to digest it, and then you try to finish your degree, and that's it. Then slowly you get your master's degree, your doctoral degree, and then you say, okay, well, hey, I'm a member of a community. And so this idea of entering a conversation is often a product of your feeling that you are a member of a community of scholars. This is something I can't teach, something that develops. But what I'm going to show you is sort of the textual, the linguistic product of not entering a conversation. And I'm going to show you what the consequence of that is and how you can try to fix it. Christine Casanave, she writes about scholarly writing, and I really like what she says about her development as an author. She said, if I wished to contribute to knowledge in my field, I needed to see my published writing as part of ongoing conversations with other published writers. So she's reflecting on her experience as a graduate student, and her getting her PhD and so on. And then she says, I like what she says here. She says, I needed to situate my work in relation to not other published articles or published books. She says other published voices. She's talking to other authors, really. And she said, I need to situate my work in relation to these other published voices. And then she says that this is the most challenging thing in writing for her. I consider this goal of situating my work in relation to what others have said to be the single most challenging and important aspect of learning to write for publication. Probably because it's the most abstract. It's something that you can't really learn. It's something that develops. But hopefully, if you're aware of this, now you can start trying to develop that. I love this here. I'll let you read this. Many of you probably have felt this way on some level before. Okay, so in my dissertation, in my thesis, I must show that I have read a lot. That's my job. I have to show my advisor that I know a lot. I have to show the reader of this article that I know my stuff. And so she talks about even an arbitrary number of 15. Okay, I have to have at least 15 references. It seems like a question that the undergraduate students ask. Professor, how many references do I need to have in my reference list? students ask me that question in the undergraduate level, I said, I'm not answering that. Because there's no answer to that. It's how many references do you need in order to feel that you have backed up your work enough, or to situate your work? But this is a common thinking that, okay, when I cite people, it's because I need to show that I have read. Not because I'm situating my work with other voices, not because I'm entering a conversation. No, just to show that I know stuff. And that's one of the drivers of the laundry list. He said, she said, literature review. In other words, to put it simply, your authorial voice arises from your sensation as being a member of an academic community, being a community member, that you have the authority to position yourself and your work in relation to other authors. And that's something, as I said, is not something I can teach you here to do, but it's something that you should be aware of, and the awareness of that, your awareness of that is important so that you don't do that when you write, not position yourself. You have to position your research. So how do you do that? Well, coming back to this here, you certainly don't do this. You certainly don't put other authors first. So let's think about other ways you can do that. Here you have the same introduction, same one here. Segundo Hayes, 80% of the information. Okay, if you look at your work, your article, and you see that you have always the author first, that should be a signal to you. Okay, I better see if my voice is not clear here. So, you can change this, not leave that first. Just like here, not leave Nakata and Yabe first. Here, you're making them the stars. You're making them, by positioning them first, you're making Hayes the star, Nakata and Yabe the star. I'm not saying they didn't deserve to be stars, but it's you. You're talking, not them. So, you could do something like this. Now, Hayes has become a number. That's all you need. And he's at the end. So that you do your job citing properly. You could even put more numbers there, since you're saying as pesquisas. Same thing with Nakata and Yabe. And did you see what happened there? A cohesive device was put in. Nakata and Yabe became number 2. But I also connected one idea to the other because it's adding, it's not separate. Here, if you look at the original structure, there are 2 separate paragraphs. But the authors want to say that both of these things are important and they contribute to the contribution being made in this article. So, one thing adds to the other. Okay, now I'm going to give you a try. You don't have to write anything, just think. You can talk about it if you want. How would you fix this? This is the original version. Aulas et al. 3, Padula Swing 4, Brody 5, Nakata and Yabe 2, Gleiton Hall 6. How could you fix that? And when I say fix, of course, I mean let the author's voice be heard. Well, right now the author's voice is being drowned out by Paulus, Padula, Brody, Nakata, and Guyton. And so, you could just simply do this. And here are some more things that you could do. In English, you can see here that I have furthermore, I have, in a recent study, not only have I reduced the prominence of the names being cited, but I have also connected the ideas, because the author now, with these changes, is positioning her or himself in relation to the other authors, saying, this is why I'm talking about these authors, not this is what these authors said. So again, if you see in your research that you're writing, that you're putting authors first, that should be a clue to you, especially if they're separate paragraphs, that should be a clue to you that you need to review what you're doing and position yourself better by connecting these ideas, but also reducing the prominence of those names so much. You should put yourself at the center. Make the connections, but put yourself at the center of those works. And these connections are often made linguistically using connecting devices, connectives, like you see here. Research has shown that blah, 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 and this little word here, furthermore, connecting device, shows to the reader, okay, so he is adding this information to the previous one. Simple little word, but makes a big difference in the 3 C's. Okay, so now you're going to have a little task. On the next side, you're going to see there's 2 columns, 6 connectives, and on the left side, and 6 connectives on the right. All you have to do, you don't have to write anything, just look. And try to connect the connectors on the left, or match the connectors on the left to the ones on the right. And if you have time, try to think of what the translation is in Portuguese for each of those. All right? Here you go. Okay, do you feel confident that you have the answers? All right, so here's how it's going to go. I'll say a word on the left, and then you, the audience, you say the word on the right. That matches it. Let's start with an easy one. Therefore. Therefore. Thus. Yeah. Similarly, likewise, furthermore, well, I was thinking moreover is a better synonym for therefore. Sorry, for furthermore. Furthermore, moreover. As well as. In addition to. And on the other hand, at the same time. Okay? So it's as well as matches in addition to, however, matches yet. Similarly matches likewise. Therefore matches thus. Furthermore matches moreover. And on the other hand, matches at the same time. So I'll say a word, I'm going to check your pronunciation. I'll say a word on the left, you say a word on the right. However, therefore, furthermore, similarly, as well as, on the other hand. Okay, now I'll make it harder. However, similarly, therefore. The women are better here, I can tell. On the other hand, furthermore, as well as. Yeah. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do this? Why is this important? Because obviously you don't want to say, you're going to need these in your writing. You don't want to use the same ones over and over and over again. So it's good to have synonyms. Now, you do have to be careful with synonyms. Because just because they're synonyms doesn't mean they can be used in the exact same way. And you also have to be careful with what you think are translations for these. So for example, what would be a translation for however? Porém? Yeah, it could be. But let's look at this more carefully. So, what's the word for this in Portuguese? Now see, you said, most people here say chafariz. I would say fonte. What would you call this? This is not a chafariz. No. But this is a chafariz. Now for me, regardless, in English, they're both fountains. This is a fountain. This is a fountain. They're both fountains. You have two separate words for the same, but I only have one word for both of these things. So you have to be careful with translation, or else I might call this a chafariz by accident. So I have to be careful. Translation is tricky. Synonyms are tricky. So a good site for synonyms is this one. I'm going to show you some examples. If you look up, we've seen this before, but just as a reminder, if you go to One Look, it's one of my favorite websites, onelook.com, and you look up, say the word therefore. On the right-hand side, you're going to have words similar to therefore, synonyms. And so you just click on that, and you see there's a bunch of options there for you. Consequently, hence, thus, and so you don't have to repeat all of them. Simple little website, and then if you want to see more examples, you see more definitions, you just click on the word there that's highlighted, that's linked. Okay. Okay. So, as I just showed you, you have that. Here, so let's see if you can find a connective. This is a Portuguese, obviously, text about publications. Can you find a connective in Portuguese that repeats a lot? An idea, connective device that repeats a lot here. Okay, you should have noticed that this is a very common way of connecting ideas in text. This em relação a, in academic writing especially, because you're positioning your ideas, you're connecting your ideas. Em relação a, com relação, diz respeito a em relação a respeito da. Okay. One possibility of doing this in English, one word that's common, many of you know this, is the word regarding. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do now is an experiment, whether you're here in this auditorium or you're at, if you're watching this online, try to go to One Look now and write the word regarding in One Look and see if you can find good synonyms that you could put here if you were writing this text in English. I know the connection here can be a bit tricky, but what you'll find is stuff like this. If you write the word regarding in One Look, you click on words similar to regarding. See concerning, related to, as to, in regard to, in relation to, vis-a-vis, and so on. And so you get something that doesn't sound so repetitive. That's obviously inserting English within Portuguese, but you would do that in an English text. You can also, for more examples, you can go to Skell, which you've already seen in this class. And you can go to the corpus. So, just as a reminder of what you can do with that, here you have a corpus of just 5 texts. Okay, so I'm going to put in the word regarding here. And let's see what happens. Oops. I only have one example, so that doesn't really help me much. I'm showing you this to show how the more files or the bigger the corpus, the more data, obviously, that you can have. It can often be better for you to see more examples and help your decisions. So I'll load a different corpus on here, a bigger one. Okay, now, as you know, you can do a keyword list, and you can see all that. Or rather, a word list, and you can see the most common words and so on. But I can also put in the word here, regarding. in a concordance. And now I can see lots of examples. I can see how it's used. And then to see what the examples or the original context, I just click on that, and I can see more context of it. Okay. Also, you can look at what's called the cotext, the words that come before and after. So let's look at the example of therefore. Now, I'm going to click on therefore. I'm going to look for therefore. In collocates, so I'm clicking on collocates here, and I'm going to write the word therefore. If I do only that, notice I've sorted by frequency left here, and I've also asked it to show me only the word that comes to the left of therefore. And what do you notice? You notice that in this corpus, the most common word that appears before therefore is and. If you click on that, you can see lots of examples of therefore. And you can explore and say, why is and therefore so common? What's happening here? And what you notice is that you have a kind of they say, I say happening, where the words, the sentence to the left, the part of the sentence to the left of and is saying an idea, and then the author is saying why that idea is important with the therefore. And this is a common pattern in academic writing. And so, coming back to this, as we just saw, they can also give different focus depending on where you put the word therefore, and different flow. So, if you see, therefore the present study aims to, compare to the present study therefore aims to, what's the difference between that? You can compare it to showing the authors first instead of talking about what's important. The first thing in the sentence is often the main thing that you focus on. And so if you're putting therefore first, you're saying this idea, this word here is the most important thing in the sentence. It can be the most prominent thing. But if you put the present study, you're saying this is what the topic is. This is the most important thing. And then therefore comes right after it. Also think about it spatially. The very location, if you start with the word the present study, if you start with the present study, that's also closer to the sentence that came before. So maybe the cohesion is a little bit better between the two ideas. So they're saying the same thing, but in a way that has a different focus, a different flow. Therefore, the evidence suggests that, here you're focusing on the evidence. Therefore, we therefore decided to, you're saying what we did. Therefore, a new approach focus is therefore necessary. So it's a subtle difference, but it can make a difference when you're thinking about the 3 C's. Okay, the second word of the attendance is method. Method, second word for attendance. All right. Now here's a real example. This is from an article that has a bilingual version. One version in Portuguese, and then the article has a translation in English. Look at the blue part. Sendo assim, okay, and then in the second part, in English, the translation is in this sense. Okay, that's okay. It's correct, but notice when I put this study first, what happens? saying, okay, this is the purpose of this study. It makes this study more of an agent, more of the actor. You could also say thus, and it flows better. Common questions that people come up with ask me, okay, how do you say this in English? And I'm going to show you a few of them that are important in English, and how sometimes there's some words in Portuguese that are a little bit tricky to translate into English. And so, for example, this one here, para tanto. How is it translated in English? This is a version in Portuguese and version in English. Do you think it's a good translation? I would say this is not a good translation. Why is it not a good translation? Because it doesn't really mean what the author thinks it means. It will be interpreted differently. So, a better way to say that is, to that end. As in here. Okay? Another word that comes up a lot in Portuguese is word diante. Comes up a lot in academic writing. Here you can see it is in the resumo there. You see diante disso. Okay, look at how it's translated in English. Is it a good translation? Yeah, I think it's fine. You have this word thus, diante disso. That's fine. However, you have other uses, you have other permutations of diante, like diante dessas considerações, which you couldn't say in English, thus, those considerations. It sounds weird. So a better translation is in light of or in view of. Like, in light of the preceding discussion, in light of these considerations, in light of the aforementioned, in light of above, in view of the above, in view of the aforementioned, that sounds better. Now, one, or a couple actually, of common connective problems that come up with from translation, one that's very common is this one here. Uma vez que. Many people translate this as once. So, there is a translation in English of uma vez que, whatever, você aprende a andar de bicicleta, você nunca mais se esquece. Once you learn to ride a bike, you never forget it. Okay, that makes sense. But there's another use in Portuguese of uma vez que that is different in English. This is what people translate it as once. But actually, it's since or as. So be careful with that. Okay, now one last problem to show you, and this one's a little one. It looks little, but actually can be big. The arrow here is pointing to the problem. Why is that little word a problem? It has to do with both coherence and cohesion. I'll show you. Do you remember this here? There was a wolf nearby and then a hungry wolf. Well, that even in Portuguese would sound strange because the second wolf is the same wolf. And if you say a hungry wolf, it sounds like it's another one. Not, if you use a definite article, the hungry wolf, then you know you're referring back to the first mention of the wolf, right? Same in Portuguese would be the same. O lobo, lobo e o lobo. If I say o lobo, then you know it refers back to the first wolf. That's clear. That's a cohesive device in that sense. It's an issue of bringing that those ideas connect. And here they don't connect because you have an indefinite article. If you have a definite article, it can change things a lot. In English, this is where it's different from Portuguese. Compare these two here. If you say a tecnologia verde in Portuguese, you have an understanding of what that means. If you say the green technology in English, it has a different power to it. Where here, the is referring back to the buses. And that is not the case in Portuguese. The first one, number one, I'm talking about green technology in general. In the second one, I'm referring to a specific technology, the one related to the buses. And in Portuguese, that would not be the case. It's a little tiny word, but can make a big difference in meaning. And so, what happens in Portuguese a lot is this. Do you see the very first sentence, the first word in the first sentence of the introduction? The hyper-mineralization. And so you might get a reader and say, okay, what does this the refer to? Which hyper-mineralization? Of course, the author, thinking in Portuguese, is just translating, talking about in general. But when you put the there, you're talking about a specific one. And so it's related to coherence and cohesion. So you got to be careful with little things like articles. Okay, so let's finish today with one little activity to test how well you have remembered all this information. You're going to go to Kahoot, especially those who are watching online because you have better connections in here. Don't translate this page, please. And you will join with this pin 9971614. Remember, you can choose any name you want as long as you keep it clean. Keep it clean. Mulher Maravilha. Great, we have the whole Justice League here. Bubba Gump. President Bolsonaro, okay. Ciro. Yeah, well, we're coming close to the election, so some free propaganda here. No. Spider-Man, all right. We'll give it a few more seconds because there is a delay for those watching online. Bolsonaro again. Ele não. Ele nunca. Okay. Here we go. complete the gap. Okay, yep, most people got that one right. That was just an easy one to get you started. Philosophically, it could be the other ones too. Next. So far, we have Biponshu as the number one. See down there? Okay. Good. Most people got that one right. Likewise, so in the same way, Trump is not approved by many or most of the country anyway, and neither is Temer. Likewise, Temer is very unpopular. Okay. Next. Okay, yeah, vast majority got that right. Good. Good job, Dr. Ellickson, I guess. And which one is correct? Good. Most people got that one right as well. Unless you mean some kind of specific electricity, the red one would not be correct. And last one. guess they're all correct. So I guess you're all correct. But yes, the correct answer was all of the above. They're all good. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, just to finish the class, about how there's no correct answer to style when it comes to presenting your work. I mention this because when you get to the method section, it's hard to focus on the method section in this class because it changes so much from area to area. And so if you go to, this is a good website to identify top journals in your area, the Simago journal website. You can find the top journals in your area. When you get to the methods section, how should you structure it? Well, first of all, some disciplines, some areas don't even include them. Some journals don't even bother. So here you have, for example, something from electrical engineering. And here there is a CARS moment 2, move 2, where they're talking about a niche. But what happens in that area, in electrical engineering, is they present a model. They present a model. There's no method section. They're just presenting a model. Same thing with this here. This is from operational research. And here they organize the paper with a literature review, and then they present a model, and there's no method section. And so it all depends on the area. What I can say is that you have to be careful with these criteria. Remember the first day of class, we talked about these are reasons that articles are rejected. And one area that is very big, but it's hard to deal with in this class because it has to do with your methodology, to do with your research as you structure it with your orientadores, your advisors, has to do with method. If you don't have a method section, you also can have problems with lack of transparency about how you did something in general, or even problems with statistics. So you have to be careful with that. Now, I can't tell you how to do statistics for your area in this class, or how to structure method for all your individual areas in this class, but what I can tell you is you should think about how to structure your method. So you can plan your headings, for example, like some people say materials and method. That way, the reader is already thinking about what to expect in the section. But you can also think about your subsections. When you open a PDF for many articles, especially in the Elsevier articles, you see on the left-hand side, you can see a menu. In your individual areas, you can look at that. You can open the articles in journals that you think you're going to publish in, and look, okay, what are the subheadings, the subtitles that people use, and think about why they chose those. So here in this case, you can see that they've chosen to highlight not just a broad method section, but to make it clear to the reader how they did something. They include participants and products, because here they're talking about something related to hedonic scale with food, products, test methods, and the analysis. That way, okay, they're saying to the reader, these are the important things to focus on in the method. Another example from my area, you wouldn't find this in other areas, but there's a corpus, corporate methods, corpus collection as subheading, and identification of lexical abundance, saying, I want to make sure that I'm transparent about what I did and why I did it. Same thing with chemical engineering. Again, very different from any other area, but they've chosen methodology 2.1, generating original pore network selection skeletons. 2.2, pore network cutting algorithm. 2.3, assigning shapes and sizes of sites and bonds, making sure, hey, reader, this is what's important here. I'm explaining to you. And also, if you do this, it's also kind of outline for yourself to remember, I got to make sure that I include details about these things. Another example. And these are all different depending on the area. For example, here in this journal about medicine, you have in this journal, they always want something about statistical analysis. If you don't have that, the calculations and the statistical analysis, the journal will say, this is not adequate for our journal. So use your mentor text also to help you guide that. You can use AntConc you can look at how people write about their method in using AntConc, and then that can give you a better style for your article. Every area is different, or each monkey on its branch. Now, to finish, drum roll please, next week you have your introduction due. First of all, between now and next week, finish your introduction. This represents 35% of your whole grade. And when you finish, you're going to use a submission form. You should look at, on our website, we have here under class documents, you have a submission form and criteria. So your essay should be written using, or rather your introduction should be written using this submission form, where you'll put your name, the date, your email, and also you can check on the website to see what the criteria for evaluation are. Download that. And you can see here that there are instructions and also specific criteria for what we're looking for in the introduction section and how you can get the best score. And also a little checklist before you submit to make sure that you've looked at all those things. On our website, after this class, not now, after this class, here at the bottom, there will be a submission form for you to attach that article and submit it. So read the evaluation criteria, download the submission form, and then you should submit your article on that submission form through our class webpage. Again, that'll be there after this class by no later than 9 a.m. on September 26th. And you'll receive feedback by the 7th of November. Right, guys? It's a lot of feedback. So it can't be don't expect it any earlier than that, but we'll try to deliver it at the latest by that date. And of course, finally, during this time, if you need any more extra feedback on your work, do feel free to book an asesoria at CAPA, which of course, just to remind you, is up here at the top of that webpage. And that's it. Next week, we're going to be we're moving away from the introduction, and we're looking at reporting data results, especially using graphical elements. See you next week.